hoping array careers have. Join me as I sit down with some of the manufacturing industry's most successful change makers and learn how they're partnering people with technology. It's time to give people more meaningful work. This is Workforce 4.0.
All right. Hey guys, how are you? Welcome to Workforce 4.0 on Workforce Wednesday. We are so excited to have Martin Cloake with us today. He's the CEO of Raven AI, and it's so good to see you guys and hear from you all this morning, afternoon, wherever you may be. I'm ready to get this party started. Martin, how are you feeling about it?
I'm feeling pretty good. Let's go.
All right. All right. Do you want to take a moment to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about your role there with Raven?
Sure, but we can also just jump into questions. So I'm the CEO and founder of Raven. We help manufacturers improve by understanding how they spend their time on the shop floor. But I won't bore our audience with details here. I'd love to jump into the questions and start talking about Workforce 4.0.
Yes. Okay. Well, let's do it. I love that. I'm always down for a good workforce conversation. So, but I've got to officially ask you the first question that has now become a tradition on Workforce 4.0. I love music. You love music. We just had such a good conversation prior to going live here about your passion for music as well. My first question for you today is, what's your go-to karaoke song? Or if you're not a huge karaoke fan, I get it. Then tell us what your favorite song is.
Well, I actually used to sing semi-professionally prior to my voice breaking in church choirs and all that kind of stuff here. And then when my voice broke, I stopped singing altogether. But during the pandemic, I actually learned how to play sort of pop piano. So I've been playing I've been accompanying, I've been the soundtrack for others to sing. So I've been playing Lumineers recently, but Ophelia is one that I'm enjoying noodling with on the piano.
I love that. Yeah, tell us a little bit more about that. I think that's very interesting because I was classically trained in piano for 12 years or so. So tell us about your newfound passion for piano.
Well, I think at some point with the pandemic, all of us had to find, especially those who have excess energy, needed to find ways to spend our time. So I kind of went off in all sorts of directions, including absolutely growing Raven. But yeah, during the pandemic, learned piano, learned tennis, learned how to longboard. So it was pretty a lot of time. Actually, it's interesting that we're talking about time later on today, but it's amazing what happens when you actually find new time, and it's exciting. So I think it's a very precious resource, and it was exciting that because of the pandemic that so many of us got to get time back that we were spending sitting on planes when we didn't need to.
I love that. Yes, I think that that speaks a lot, that you invested so much of your personal time that you did get back and really went for it. YOLO, as the kids would say, right? And I love that you're learning to play piano. Tell us a little bit more about what inspired you to play piano, and specifically the Lumineers.
Oh, my kids asked me to play it, so I think with most things in my life, people ask me to do stuff, and I'm pretty good at doing it. But yeah, music, I think it's in some ways, all of us are looking for that balance between work and family and activities, and with the pandemic, I think a lot of us were able to find a balance that works well for us. So music is just something that's super complementary, and I think when you have a healthy balance, things are more successful in all areas. Well, one of the things that I think I sort of go back to the pandemic as having a sort of positive impact was that many of us, especially in tech, had to travel around for various reasons, and it was just the thing that was the thing to do. And I think now that more and more of us are comfortable creating connections online and via Zoom, it's just unlocked a huge amount of capacity and energy to dedicate to other things. And that's not to say that meeting in person isn't still valuable, but we can be much more selective and not doing it because it's just the thing to do always. We can be selective and meet in person when it's when we have energy to give our all to it. So yeah, I think I generally look at things positively, but there's a lot of things that happened after the pandemic that are better for success in business and in life in general.
Absolutely, yeah. I can see that. And it's been great on LinkedIn, growing the manufacturing community. And you've certainly had a big part of that. And that kind of is a great segue into our first official question here. Um, but how important is keeping people at the center of digital transformation as we increase technical applications in the manufacturing industry? What do you think about that?
Well, manufacturing is still fundamentally a people business, and I think this is something that, for those of us who may have started our careers outside of manufacturing, say in engineering or in tech, we assume that manufacturing is primarily machinery outputting goods where people are, watching the machinery. So I think manufacturing is still fundamentally a people business, and if you want to be successful, people at the core of that. And I'm getting a lot of feedback here. Hold on a second here. Yeah, I'm hearing huge feedback. Let me see if I can fix this. Sorry, I'll just deal with it. Yeah, so manufacturers are, people's. Okay, I can't. Hold on a second here. Let me just reset my audio. Sorry about that.
You're all good. While we take a moment and let you do that, I'm going to bring up Dan Bigger is here today. Hello, Dan. He's just saying good afternoon, everyone. Well, good afternoon, Dan. Thanks for joining us today. Also, want to remind everyone out there watching, if you want to jump in the chat and ask your own questions for Martin or contribute and in the conversation in any way, just keep that chat rolling and we'll bring up the comments here as we go.
So I can jump in and I'll just deal with the feedback here. But one of the things that successful manufacturers have been doing for a long time is manage change. And often the change involves technology. So on the shop floor, this change could be a new piece of machinery, even equipment that would be categorized as digitization has been around for a long time. And so this is something new. This is not something that's new. And I think there's a difference between involving folks in digital transformation in a way that is expected and understood, and doing it in a way that's unexpected and not understood. And I think the key thing here is to make sure that we recognize that things cannot be done without warning, and they can't be done without explaining the value that the change provides. Folks on the shop floor are, for the most part, quite practical and open to the idea that new things will drive improvement. But if you come and implement a solution unexpectedly where the value that it provides is unknown, there's gonna be a lot of challenge here. So I think the key thing here is to involve folks on the shop floor in digital transformation early on, and if they expect it and understand things and see that the things that are being deployed are obviously useful, there's not going to be pushback. And I think that the key thing here is to recognize that digital transformation, when done properly, is very similar to the kinds of transformations that have been done for decades in manufacturing. And it's not some new way. It's technology that's enabling better performance, and it's not replacing. It's complementing manufacturing, which is and will continue to be a combination of equipment and people working collaboratively to output stuff for customers.
Yeah, so that's kind of an interesting point of view. And I appreciate that. Do you care if I unpack that just a little bit and just ask you, because you have worked, your background is mechanical engineering, if I'm thinking correctly. Yeah, you've worked on a shop floor. When you're having these conversations with companies on digital transformation and Industry 4.0 technology, what has been some of the most successful ways that you've guided those conversations to eliminate that fear, right? Or to ensure to the end user that the technology is helpful and useful and is creating value to their everyday day-to-day lives?
Well, maybe I'll preface it. So my degree is in mechanical engineering, but my first job out of school was working on the shop floor. One of the first roles was as a supervisor, and one of the things that struck me was how different the shop floor was than I had expected it to be, in engineering school. So I think what struck me, the main thing was that it was, as I mentioned before, way more related to. I'm sorry, the feedback is crazy. So yeah, sorry about this. Yeah, no. So as far as addressing the concerns in the shop floor, I think in some ways many manufacturers need to just forget about the fact that it's digital transformation or any kind of transformation and go back to the basics. And the basics is to make sure people are aware, make sure they're heard. When it comes to deployment, technology has the benefit of being able to get flicked on with a switch. And one of the things that I always sort of go back to when talking about digital transformation is walking the shop floor and seeing a whiteboard with metrics. Because the first thing that an engineer would do if you see if you see a whiteboard on the shop floor, and what would your first instinct be?
Um, I suppose actionable items. It depends on what from an HR perspective, I'm thinking about like metrics like safety and quality issues and things like that. Is that kind of similar to what you're
Yeah, I think
alluding to?
that's way closer to what it should be. But I think when engineers see a whiteboard on the shop floor. It's always interesting. You post something on LinkedIn about a whiteboard and people freak out. There's like the pro whiteboard group that says this is the best thing ever. Then there's the one saying like this should be digitized. How is it possible in 2022 that somebody is using a whiteboard on the shop floor? And if you want to create argument on LinkedIn, just post something with a whiteboard and say this is bad or this is good. But the reality is that that whiteboard, one of the things that it has is the operators on the shop floor understood it, and they were part of the process. They saw the engineer go up there, and I was an engineer with the rulers and the Sharpies and stickers and all that to create this whiteboard. They interacted with it, and it did, highlight important things as you just mentioned. So the one thing that engineer walking through the shop floor doesn't see is the fact that there was engagement involved to get to the point where there was a whiteboard there, and if it worked properly, you'd see a super messy whiteboard that was being used all the time. So, deploying a whiteboard on the shop floor, there's a way to do this, and many manufacturers are excellent at doing that in a way that creates engagement on the shop floor and then the right kinds of behaviors. So now, if as an engineer coming in without understanding how the shop floor works, you say, okay, let's just take that whiteboard and let's just digitize it and slam it back on the shop floor in an instant. And then from one day to the next, you now have no whiteboard and you have this big digital whiteboard. What happens is that you've lost that connection to operators. So you can deploy technology with a flip of a switch, but people don't work that way. So in the same ways, if you're looking to find ways to deploy any kind of solution on the shop floor, whether or not it's the kind of stuff my company does or vision systems or robotics, there's a way to do this where people on the shop floor understand why it's being done. It's being deployed in a way that's incremental so that they understand the obvious usefulness, obvious utility of what's being done. And then once they see it, the vast majority of folks on the shop floor are there to do a good job. And if they see a better way, they will take that better way. And I think that's the key thing here, where we're sort of over focusing on deployment of technology and not the fact that organizations and people on the shop floor, it needs to get integrated with them, but it takes longer and it's a different approach. So there's two things here. You can't think of manufacturing as just a collection of machines that's being watched by people. It's this organization that is both people and machines, and ultimately it's people that determine how well these organizations perform.
That's some very good feedback for us. Thank you for that. I do want to take a minute and get to some of these comments. You guys are blowing the chat up. I really appreciate you guys so much. First and foremost, we have to give our girl Carol a shout out. Carol, thank you so much for coming today and supporting Workforce 4.0 and everything you do for both Martin and I. We really appreciate it. It's good to see you.
Hey, girl.
And Mike Demos asks, are there any tools out there to evaluate an organization's readiness for transformation? That's a really good question, Mike. What do you think, Martin?
Yeah, I think organizational readiness. Oh, is that a noise thing? So organizational readiness, organizations need to have adopted some sort of continuous improvement methodology successfully before they're ready to deploy technology, and that's something that this kind of capability has been around for a long time. So in some ways, like when organizations are discussing, whether or not they're ready for digital transformation, and they're focusing on technological capabilities, in some ways it's looking in the wrong area. And in many cases, the organizations focusing on technological capability is giving a pass to technology providers that have technology that's too complicated or too difficult to deploy. So I think that the main thing is to to make sure to have a strong culture of continuous improvement that connects the shop floor to engineering to IT, now more and more to the executive, and I would focus on that. And it's strange to sort of suggest that the readiness is more related to an organizational and continuous improvement culture rather than having certain technological capabilities. But fundamentally, those kinds of things, if they're in place, if folks see that there's better ways of doing things with technology, they will adopt it. And if the technology is good, it won't be overly complex to adopt. And there's a bunch of amazing technology ready today, whether or not it's vision systems or robotics or analytics tools. There's a bunch of stuff there, and the resistance isn't because folks don't want to improve their organization. The resistance is because they don't understand or they don't trust that it's actually going to fix the things that they see on the front lines.
That's an interesting perspective as well. Thank you, Mike, again for your question, and I hope that helps. Let us know if that answered your question here in the chat. That's actually a really good segue onto our next question, which kind of gets more into the concept of continuous improvement. But what value do you feel the frontline workforce brings to continuous improvement efforts, and what inspires you to be so committed to continuous improvement? Because I know you're very passionate about that.
Well, I guess what value at some point, if you're like the front lines are the ones that are driving that value, where at some point, if in an organization you're not standing in front of a machine producing goods, you should be doing something to enable them to produce those goods, right? So if you're an F1 driver, there's the car, and then there's the crew that's around it and all the organizational structure. So in some points, like in F1, you elevate the driver. In manufacturing, the ones that are delivering that value are those who stand in front. So I think that framing is important, and I think folks on the shop floor recognize if they're being seen and elevated in a way where the organization respects the fact that they are the ones who are at the end of the day delivering the goods to the consumer, versus organizations where the front lines are seen as a source of data or a consumable resource. And I think that's something that you see in world-class cultures where you can even tell walking the shop floor whether or not folks are looking you in the eye, whether or not they're giving you a smile, whether or not they're focused on their work. It's really interesting. I don't walk plants as much as I used to, but I think there's a feel that you have when you go to an organization that has a strong continuous improvement culture. So really, I said it earlier on, manufacturing is still fundamentally a people business, and folks on the shop floor, supervisors, process engineers, technicians, operators, really that's kind of the lifeblood of manufacturing. So like they have to be a core of continuous improvement and transformation for it to be successful.
I can just give you some feedback from what I've seen in recruiting and talent acquisition as well. But I can't emphasize enough to build on your points that quality culture, world-class culture is a real motivation factor that people consider when they are looking at new employment opportunities. So I can verify from my end that that is a concern from people that I talk to as well, and operators and people on the floor. so I appreciate your feedback on that and support. And I can definitely agree. There's, right? When you walk into some manufacturing facilities and everybody's smiling and they're communicating well, and it just gives this sense of teamwork that isn't necessarily always found in every place that you go into, but that's such a great feeling, right?
Yeah, there's a certain smile because it's not everybody smiling like it's party time. Because there's like a smile, then it's like, all right, now leave me alone because I'm trying to focus on doing my job. So there's a balance, I think. But there's a feeling you definitely get. And I sort of mentioned the whiteboards earlier. When I see like a well-used whiteboard, I think that's pretty exciting to me. Even though I know that there's a way to replace that with technology. But yeah, I miss visiting plants, and a well-run manufacturing plant is a joy to be in.
Absolutely. Um, let's bring up a comment from Jason. We have to give him a shout out as well. Hey, Jason, it's good to see you. How are you? He says, hello, Ann and Martin. And in regards to your former response to Mike's question earlier, Chris wants to chime in and say the best answer yet. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Chris, for coming. It's always good to see you as well. Um, as we move on to our next question here, we have some involvement, we have some co-interest, right? And really how we know each other is through the Industry 4.0 Club, which I believe you were one of the OG founders of, if I'm thinking correctly, maybe you and then Ryan Therese and then
Yeah,
Al.
yeah, it was yeah, I can go into it briefly if that's interest here. But yeah, but anyways, we leave that for another time. But yeah, absolutely. Early on, Industry 4.0 Club was, again, I sort of mentioned all that energy that, many of us have that was kind of squished because of the pandemic. So it resulted in us, meeting and chatting about Industry 4.0 on Clubhouse first and on LinkedIn and then now in a bunch of other settings.
Absolutely. And it's been great getting to know you through that capacity. And yeah, I think it's interesting when we go around and we do have the Industry 4.0 Club meetings and or the lives, and it's like a get to know the founders episode or edition or what have you. And we're all telling our stories of how we kind of ended up together as this collective. But you have been instrumental in teaching me a lot about the Industry 4.0 technology that's not only currently available, but the progression of Industry 4.0 as a whole. And kind of as we move into that progression into the era of Industry 4.0 or digital transformation, where do you feel like the biggest career opportunities for the frontline workforce exist?
I think one of the things here is that, as technology progresses, it's becoming easier and easier to use. And in some ways, technology is leveraging the fact that much of the workforce is now familiar with using consumer technologies. So I think the days of folks needing to learn how to use an AS400 terminal, which I used back in the day when I was on the shop floor, are going away. And now more and more, some of this, technology is just easy to use out of the box. So with technology being easy to use out of the box, easy to deploy, no code applications and all these other kinds of things, the kinds of skills that will be needed aren't necessarily those technological skills. Those are the skills that, leadership, continuous improvement, supporting teams through change, all of these skills that, we often saw on the shop floor, but folks would get, I guess, stopped, and they would make it so far, and then they wouldn't be able to jump beyond the shop floor because they didn't have those technological capabilities. I would say those soft skills, change management, with enough of a knowledge of kind of the technologies available, but I would over-index on some of those soft skills rather than those technology skills, because technology is getting easier and easier and easier to use, and having folks in manufacturing companies who know how to develop new software and all that. I think this is something that is happened out of necessity because their technology hadn't gotten to the point where it does exactly what manufacturers need, but it is now. So yeah, I would focus on those skills, those leadership skills, change management ones that are valuable all the time. And I think the opportunities for those who are good at that today are going to continue to grow.
I love that answer. Can I get more into depth with that? So, if you have someone that is on a production line and they're an operator, where do you feel like the biggest career transformation for them? Like, what does that path look like to you from maybe production operator to robotics coordinator or something like that?
Well, okay, so digital transformation is accelerating. More technologies are coming into the plant. So now, as they come in, there's going to be a lot of work needed to integrate these kinds of things organizationally. So in order to do that, I was sort of referring to the fact that the primary skill set needed is change management, but you also need to understand how this technology provides value in the best way. So you don't necessarily need to understand what happens under the hood, but awareness of what's available, awareness of how to deploy effectively. So I think for folks who've demonstrated capability to just as I say you're a team lead or a production supervisor, I think stepping into these roles where you are aware of involved with digital transformation, but have a skill set that enables organizational integration. So often, when organizations bring in management consultancies to help with change management, there's a lot of heavy lifting that's needed to make it happen. But the more capability there is to sustain those changes after the consultancy's initial involvement, the better. So I would say for those who are looking for progression, making sure to be aware of technologies. So similar to what many people are doing with Industry 4.0 Club, be aware of technologies, be aware of different use cases. And I think that awareness is key. So combining awareness of new advancements in technology with the ability to support change management are two skill sets that are going to be highly valuable in the near term and today.
That's an excellent answer. And as a recruiter, I get asked all the time of what technical certifications do I need to consider for career advancement? How do I make career transitions into manufacturing? So I love that feedback and I appreciate that answer so much. And speaking of digital transformation journeys, Jason is letting us know that he is with a customer currently, and he's going to also be walking a shop floor today to see how they can start their transformation journey. That's awesome, Jason. I love to hear that. Excellent feedback. I believe we have time for one more question today, if that's okay with you, Martin.
Go for it.
Okay. So lastly, I named this episode of Workforce 4.0, Digital Transformation Starts with Your Frontline. How does your company Raven attribute to giving people more meaningful work? And where do you feel like the data is being collected from Raven? How do you feel like that's giving businesses the ability to make better real-time decisions?
Well, I think we sort of started things off describing how, personally, the way that, I view world-class manufacturers as ones that elevate the front lines. And I think the way that we've built Raven has always been around this idea of elevating, the operators in particular to enable better performance. And better performance on the shop floor is good for shareholders, it's good for consumers, and ultimately it's better for operators on the shop floor. So the frame that we've typically use is that we provide technology that's used by operators in particular on the shop floor as a way of highlighting where there are inefficiencies. But the frame is if you have a tool that you can provide to operators that basically can poke engineering to work on the problems that are needed, on the things that are slowing them down in the moment, or the things that are slowing them down systematically. That's kind of the frame that we have around our technology in particular. So now, if as part of using our technology to trigger support in the moment or to highlight inefficiencies over time, those interactions also provide data that helps inform our clients how they're spending their time. So, the value that we provide to our customers, simply put, is to give them a complete accounting of how time is spent on the shop floor. And if you can account for how every second of production time is spent in a way that is not aversive to the front lines, that data set that describes where your inefficiencies are is useful to the front lines. It's useful to maintenance. It's useful to leadership. It's useful to everybody once you understand truly how you're spending your time. Unfortunately, today, many manufacturers have a fuzzy view of what's actually happening. And then when decisions are made to drive gains, they're using instinct and other methods, and that's what happens when you create misalignment with the shop floor. If you guess where the inefficiencies are and you make a mistake, the shop floor will tell you right away, but the ship may have already sailed. So I think for us, the idea of giving the operators on the shop floor that stick to poke the organization to work on the right things, the operators will appreciate it because it's addressing inefficiencies that they see, they experience, and the organization will appreciate it because it's highlighting where they should be focusing their improvement efforts. And customers will appreciate it because at some point, customers want to have cheaper product delivered faster, high quality. So all these good things here. So ultimately, if you get it right, it benefits all stakeholders.
That's amazing feedback. Thank you so much for that. I do have one more question from the chat if you have time. I know you're really busy, so I just want to check in and make sure that you have a time
Yeah, go for it.
for that. Okay. This is coming from Chris. Do you think that technology providers are going overboard with the digital transformation now if you want to survive mantra? And that is a valid concern. I do hear that when I'm talking about the club to people that I'm connecting with and to other leaders in manufacturing. What are your thoughts though, Martin?
Great question. So the challenges that manufacturers face are changing, making it more and more difficult to avoid digital transformation. So if you go back, several years ago, the way manufacturing operations would work, you'd come up with a plan that wouldn't necessarily change that much from week to week. You would have predictable staffing on the shop floor. Your warehouse would be full of the kinds of materials that you need to build your stuff, and then expectations from customers with regards to delivery is manageable. So I think with that kind of model of manufacturing, you can be quite successful using your AS400 and Excel and engineers and whiteboards. And I think that worked for a long, long time. Some of the challenges that are coming in today, which are making it more difficult and not impossible, because there's organizations that can still rely on instincts and talent to drive pretty amazing performance. It's just becoming more and more difficult with supply chain disruption. You don't have the parts that you thought you'd have, and therefore your whole plan for the day is messed up. You're having to change over way more than you want. You don't have the right amount of labor because people don't want to work in manufacturing. And then compound that with the fact that all of us and you and I are to blame as well. We expect highly customized goods to be delivered almost instantly. So like all these market forces are making it so that that time frame around which you need to plan for are much shorter, which makes it more difficult to rely on instincts and historical data to perform. So now that it's more difficult to perform, those who found a way to incorporate these new tools with those best practices that still do work are being most successful. So organizations can continue to, don't need to jump onto the bandwagon right now, but it's going to become more and more challenging and more reliant on that, amazing instincts to be able to make changes in the moment. So I think the whole thing with digital transformation is that it commoditizes excellent performance. And that's not to say somebody can't perform at an amazing level, but at some point, your organization may not have the world's best, production planner or the world's best maintenance technician. So the difference between the best and the rest gets minimized as you find ways to integrate new technologies. So long-winded answer, but I think it's becoming more and more risky to push it off. But that's not saying that if somebody has an example of an organization that they do things the way that they did in the 60s and it's still successful, I commend them for it, and that's probably a pretty amazing culture. But that's just harder, becoming harder and harder.
amazing feedback on that, and a very detailed answer as well. We are at time today. I appreciate your time, Martin. I really do. It's been a treat having you on today. If there's anyone in the audience that is listening in or watching, how do you propose that they connect with you? What's the best way to establish contact?
Yeah, so LinkedIn or my email is martin@raven.ai. So either of those work. Yeah, I'm a friendly guy. Feel free to reach out. And I see that we're over time here, so I feel like I could have spoken faster. So maybe next time if we're on again, I'll just crank it up another 20% so we could be in the half an hour.
I think I have heard Martin. For anybody listening, I have heard Martin just go with it, and like he is saying, and he is quite capable of doing that. But I
So
know
faster. So I apologize for speaking so slowly. Next time I'll be better.
that's great. No, I thought it was perfect. I thought it was perfect. But we appreciate everybody for tuning in today. All of your questions and comments, and just checking in and telling us where you are and that you're watching. Really do appreciate it. You guys rock. Martin.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, thanks for having me. This was I had a blast here. Thanks for inviting me in.
Perfect.
Great show.
Perfect. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. So for everybody watching, we will see you next Wednesday on Workforce 4.0. And I'm looking forward to seeing everybody again, and have a happy Workforce Wednesday.
Bye.
Hey y'all, my name is Ann Wyatt. I started my career in workforce development with the state of Kentucky.